On today's show, when they speak, we listen. We'll break down what we learned from General Manager Steve Staios and Head Scout Don Boyd as they address the media this morning.
And we reflect on the Ottawa Senators draft trends and patterns since 2020.
This is Brady Tkachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets at FanDuel if your first $5 bet wins. Just head to FanDuel.com to get started. You can also check out, they've got lots of draft props. We're going to be all over those later this week. Today is Wednesday, June 25th. And did you get any sense of what direction the Senators are going to go at 21 based on what Steve Staios or Don Boyd said this morning?
Not really, Ross. I mean, I think the biggest sense I got is we might not be looking at the Ottawa Senators drafting at 21st overall, as Steve Staios hinted that they have been at least considering the idea of trading back in the draft to acquire more draft capital or other assets. Something I've been saying all along, Ross, that I think that would be a smart strategy for the Ottawa Senators this draft.
It would be, especially since the consensus seems that outside of the top 10, there is as wide a variety as we've seen in a number of years, probably since we've started covering the draft more in depth back in 2018. So there's going to be so much drama, so much entertainment on Friday night, and we will get you prepped tomorrow with our final rankings after we've done our countdowns based on all of our scouts. Pilsy and I have put our brains separate, actually, and then we're going to battle it out and debate our own lists and what could be the best fits for the Ottawa Senators. But this is a segue show where we've spent the last number of weeks, even months since the Ottawa Senators last game on May 1st, discussing the prospects within this draft. Tomorrow, we'll discuss which prospects fit Ottawa, but to learn about future situations, you have to look back to past situations. So a little bit later on in the show, Pilsy and I have done a complete audit on the last 5 drafts for the Senators, and the organization should be thanking us that we're including 2020 in this, which was a complete grand slam draft. But before we get to that, some other notes from Steve Staios and from Don Boyd. First off, we alluded to it yesterday. We thought the Senators were getting closer to Claude Giroux on a contract. Steve Staios, as expected, provided no update. He's not going to tip his hand one way or another. But Pierre LeBrun from TSN did say that Pat Brisson is expected to meet with the Ottawa Senators again this afternoon to discuss that. Brisson, of course, is Giroux's agent. I went through a bit of a roller coaster, Pilsy, where I felt a little less confident about a week and a half ago, but now I'm back all the way confident. I think they're going to dot the I's, cross the T's, and this deal is going to get done before the draft.
They got to get it done before the draft, Ross. Otherwise, there's really only one weekday, June 30th, before free agency, and you do not want it coming down to that Monday without a deal done. I'm still confident they get it done. I really don't think Claude Giroux wants to leave, and not that him and Brisson will bend the knee to the Ottawa Senators, but I think in the end, they're going to realize that this is the best situation for Giroux and his family. And man, leaving at the time where you finally made the playoffs and now you finally see the vision and new ownership, new management, new coaching staff, where everything has much more stability than it had when Claude Giroux came here, would be a strange decision in my point, unless he truly feels disrespected by the offers that the Sens are offering him.
Yeah, and this is going to be really interesting to see the breakdown of the deal, how much of it is bonuses for performance versus typically we see a lot of over 35 players take games played bonuses. You want to make sure that the durability is there, but clearly that's not an issue for Claude Giroux. Other than that one rest game he got at the end of this season, he's played every single possible game for the Ottawa Senators. So with that in mind, what percentage, and this is obviously such a wide range because we don't know what the final contract, if it is a 1-year deal and it has the ability then to have bonuses, what percentage of the contract's full value, if applied, would be in bonuses versus the cap hit for this season?
Oh boy, you're making me do math here.
Well, let's say because Bruce said like $3.5 million could be the base salary. So what do you think they would have to pump up the performance bonuses to? Like 5.5? Because if he's a 60, 70 point player, I think 5.5 would be a pretty fair, reasonable contract.
Yeah, definitely. Now, the question is, do you think he can get to 60, 70 points? He had 50 last year playing 81 games. So I'm not sure. I don't see an dramatic increase in points. I'd say more likely he's going to finish around the 50-point mark again. I'll put it 45 to 55 points, right around there. But Claude Giroux racking up points is not why you'd be bringing him back, in my opinion. He's still a contributor, but the face-offs, the veteran leadership, and also it's a good look on the team if they're able to hold a respected veteran like that and get him at a deal that works for both the team and the player. I think, Ross, we're going to see big playoff bonuses and maybe something like, if we're going to do games played bonuses, in the 60-70 game range, not anything below that, just to say, hey, you're going to get these, barring a major injury, which obviously we hope does not happen, but you're most likely going to get those, and then you dangle a little carrot for the playoff performances.
Still fourth among Sens forwards in points last year with 50. Steve Staios also mentioning this morning that they're looking for 5-on-5 scoring help this offseason. However, he believes, and we've noted this many times on the show, that they feel like they addressed that in part with the Dylan Cousins and with the Fabian Zetterlund pickups in the middle of the last season. Despite Ottawa finishing dead last in the league in 5-on-5 goals, they were around 20th from the trade deadline on. So still not great, but better with those two in the fold. Pillsy, how about a $28 million bonus if the Sens win the cup? Or ownership in the team. I just want to win the Stanley Cup, man.
Yeah, I mean, give them big cup bonus. I don't know about 28 million, Ross. You start to get into some cap trouble.
I'm pretty sure that's over the max salary by a lot.
Yeah. So we're probably not going to go that route. But yeah, definitely. If
2.8
they win the cup, who cares what happens to your cap the next season, honestly?
Exactly. All right, Pilsy, before we get to the audit on the Sens drafting strategy, and later on in the show, we are going to touch on the 2025 Hockey Hall of Fame inductees that were announced yesterday. It includes my favorite player from my childhood with the Ottawa Senators. And we'll talk about how if you played for the Senators at any point in your career, you might be in the Hockey Hall of Fame next year, because it's been a lot of recent additions over the last 5 years from the Ottawa Senators organization, and they didn't have basically anybody before that. But Pilsy,
yes,
captain of the Ottawa Senators, Brady Tkachuk, was on the Cam and Strick podcast yesterday. Great conversation with them. He is just an all-time guy. But the big news out of that, besides pumping the tires of his teammates and talking about how the Senators feel like the next step has to happen, they're not satisfied, is that he's still not skating, man. Like, he was battling through that hip, it feels like. And I know he dealt with that other injury at the end of the season that he suffered in Pittsburgh, upper body. Nobody knows exactly what it is. But, man, you need him ready and ready again for training camp. Like, I need him skating full time before training camp, because that can't be a conversation going into another year where for like the 10th, 20th straight year, we're going to talk about how Ottawa cannot afford a slow start out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, we're in June, so the fact that he's not skating doesn't bother me. I think, Ross, as a general rule, once the team that finishes winning the Stanley Cup stops partying, that's when the clock resets to get ready for next season. So he's got tabs on Matthew Tkachuk. As soon as he's done partying, that's when you try to get to it. But in all seriousness, you need to give players a break. And sure, you can say the Ottawa Senators only played till May 1st. We got to May. We did it. But you need to take that rest. You need some time to relax. You need time to be with your family, to get away from hockey, especially, Ross, you can understand this as a new parent, having a newborn, it takes a lot out of you. So you need
Fourth
time
coffee
for
of
that
the
as
day.
well. Yeah, more coffee. So I don't have any issue with that. And I don't really read too much into it. And Ross, you
not
got
issue. Just the fact that he said he's not feeling great.
Yeah. I mean, you'd wish he was feeling great all the time, but that's not life. So a lot of us are day to day here. But you got Travis Green as well, who is notorious for hard training camps. Now, we didn't see the puking on the ice or players passed out like in Vancouver. I think he learned that maybe he's got to dial that down a little bit, but I don't think any of the Ottawa Senators players are going to come into camp not ready, not prepared, not hungry.
He also did say about Jake Sanderson, he's like, we finished May 1st. I bet you Sandy was skating 5 times a week starting May 8th.
Well, Sandy could just wear skates and skate out of bed and it wouldn't be an issue. Like that the guy's skating is not a problem for him, and I don't even think he considers skating work. It's just easy for him.
It's unreal. Okay, Pillsy, let's get to the audit on the Ottawa Senators drafting since the big draft 2020, where they came out with Jake Sanderson among many more potential stars. That's next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Pillsy. New sponsor alert.
Woo, woo, woo.
Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to rougiette.com/LockedOnNHL and use code LockedOnNHL to get 15% off today. That's Rougiette, RUGIET.com/LockedOnNHL and use promo code LockedOnNHL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. All right, Pillsy. The Ottawa Senators have a busy week ahead. And I mean 7-day week. Not just the end of this week with the draft, but next Tuesday. Happy Canada Day, eh? Well, the Senators will be opening free agency on that day, and they still have spots in their roster that need to be filled. I'm talking about the fourth line center role that will likely be vacated by Adam Gaudette, a decision on Nick Cousins, and that fourth line left wing spot. And then, of course, there's the uncertainty still around Claude Giroux. And what additions can Steve Staios make? Those are all answers we hope to get in the next little while.
And backup goaltender, Ross. Steve Staios did not make it clear that Anton Forsberg was going to be coming back. And I haven't even really heard of contract negotiations or any discussions of the sort. So that's going to be interesting.
Yes, it will. As he said, the team would be comfortable with Levi Merilainen or Mads Søgaard being the backup goalie in the NHL next season. Now, both of those goalies were draft picks of the Ottawa Senators. Søgaard in 2019, the Sens traded up in the second round to get him. And then in 2020, they took a kid nobody had even heard of, Levi Merilainen. And that was a good look, because without Levy's 8-3-1 record this past season, does Ottawa make the playoffs?
No, Levy saved the season, and I think Sens fans are well aware of that.
Yes, they are. I wanted to see him get one fifth place Calder vote, but 12 games, you understand why he didn't.
Yeah, that's fair.
But talk about leaving a good taste in voters' mouths. I mean, his last game of the season was a shutout.
Yeah, 6-0 win. Decent.
So let's look back at the last 5 drafts for the
Okay.
Ottawa Senators. And we've got the classic Google Doc table because I couldn't fit all this information into a graphic if I tried. So if you're watching on YouTube, you get to see how we went through this all together. And we went year by year and then overall as well. So without further ado, let's pull this up because there are different themes for different years, but the overall results, well, there's themes that last throughout all of them as well. So the Senators with 36 picks total over the last 5 drafts, 10 of them in 2020 when they had 6 picks in the first 2 rounds. Now, with that said, they haven't had a first round pick in 2 of the last 3 drafts. And their first round pick in the most recent draft obviously has only played 1 season. So it's a little unfair to be looking back, hindsight 2020, on a draft that's only 12 months old because, well, it's not expected really that these players are going to make an NHL impact or whatnot. But I do think it is worth noting where they draft out of and what makes an Ottawa Senators draft pick. So before we get into the individual seasons, Pillsy, I'll start with a general question. What did you learn going through this exercise?
I learned that our assumption and accusation of saying the Ottawa Senators draft for size was 100% correct.
Okay.
And backed by data and stats.
Yes, you want to get into that data right away?
I mean, it's the most obvious thing that I think if we didn't get into it right away, we would just be leading up to it. So
yeah, well, leading up. So we had a great comment too by Eric on Twitter saying that if you're not Pillsy's height, then don't bother applying to work for the Ottawa Senators as a player.
Which I identify as 6'3" for everyone to know.
Okay.
I've measured myself at 6'2", but so many people that I meet are like, dude, you are not 6'2", you're 6'3". So I've decided I identify as 6'3".
Okay, I'd say you're 6'3" as well.
See?
With that said, we scroll to the height. And overall, out of 36 picks, Pillsy, in the last 5 drafts, 24 out of those 36 picks are 6'2" or taller. Now, I'm not a math guy, so I've pulled out the calculator here.
Smart.
That's 67% of the players they've drafted in their last 36 picks are 6'2" or taller.
Yeah, I mean, another way to look at this, Ross, is there have only been 2 selections that are under 6 feet. That height do not start with a 6. Ridley Gregg and Tyson Dick.
And Tyson Dick was the 206th overall pick in his draft class in 2022. You look at how, like, that's already an incredible statistic, but 6'4" and taller. Like, let's push the needle up to 6'4" at least. 13 out of 36 picks. That's 36% still.
Yeah.
That's wild. So basically, when you're looking at the 2025 draft, if you're not 6'2", there is a very slim chance you're going to be the selection because the first pick of each of these drafts, 6'3" last year with Yakimchuk, 6'2" in 2023, 6'4" in 2022 with Philip Nordberg in the second round. 2024 was Hoyt Stanley. That's when Ottawa only had a 4th round pick to start things off. In 2021, it was Tyler Boucher at 6'1", but he was also built like a truck at 210 pounds. And then Tim Stützle at 3rd overall. That point has to be best player available. And I'm glad the Senators understood the assignment and went with that.
Well, it's funny, Ross, because I admittedly, I was on the side leaning towards Quentin Byfield, but he obviously went second towards the LA Kings. But we've heard that Tim Stützle was first on their list regardless. So that it's funny that when it comes to that echelon of the draft in the top 5, that they were able to steer away from their size narrative.
So size is number 1. But outside of that, what would be the second most glaring note that the Senators draft with?
Well, the Ottawa Senators organization has been known to be a haven for Swedish players, and that's because the Ottawa Senators typically like to draft and develop Swedish players, and we see 7 of their 36
Yep.
draft picks in the last 5 years have come from Sweden. So that still remains to be true. We haven't seen those players really stick around and be developed and be a part of the NHL organization, unfortunately. But clearly, they take a big piece, or they really take notice of what their European scouts are seeing and what they're seeing in Sweden.
In the mid to late 2010s, they drafted a lot out of the USNTDP. You think of Colin White, you think of, I'm blanking on it now, but there's plenty more. Obviously, Brady Tkachuk was at Boston University, but was at the program before they traded for Josh Norris, who was in the program. But ever since 2020, where they took 2 defensemen from the USNTDP in Jake Sanderson and Tyler Clevin, Tyler Boucher was the last pick that they've had from the program. So that's been a drier spell for the Senators in a historically ripe ground for their scouting. Instead, they've elected to go from the CHL a lot. They've gone 5 picks from the WHL, 4 picks from the Ontario Hockey League, so 9 picks total from the Western and Ontario leagues, and only 2 from the Q, and both of those were in 2020 with Igor Sokolov and Philip Daou as the picks there. So you can expect them to likely take at least 1 player from the Canadian Hockey League in this upcoming draft. And then you even look at it, they go with guys who are expecting to play at the next level. So this, to me, is one of the more interesting parts. A lot of the Ottawa Senators draft picks have been from leagues that will then go to leagues that usually get drafted out of more. They've taken 2 high school players from the United States, including last year with Javon Moore, and they've taken 3 players from the USHL that then go on to either colleges, or now I guess they can move on to the Ontario Hockey League, like Blake Montgomery did when they took him last year in the 4th round. They've taken 2 players from Finnish junior leagues. They've also gone to the 2nd division in both Finland and Sweden once. So there's a wide variety, but you look at the top of this list, Swedish junior players are a priority for the Ottawa Senators. Last year, they got 1 of them in Eric Wallenius, who is Finnish but was playing in the Swedish league. So I would keep an eye out for 1 CHL player at least, 1 Canadian Hockey League player, and 1 player from the USHL. That's where I'm going to say I'm keeping an eye out in this upcoming draft.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's going to be interesting, Ross, to see not just the Senators, but specifically the Senators, but the league overall, how teams navigate or look at players that are transferring from the CHL to NCAA. If that is enticing, if that maybe isn't what they want because now you're not developing in their backyard, or the idea that you're moving from playing multiple games a week to pretty much only weekend will affect their decisions, or if teams will be looking at those players that haven't made commitments yet and be like, we'd like to draft you because now we can work and collaborate with you, your agent, your family, everything, to try to pick a spot that we think makes sense for both the player and us as an organization. So now that there's not those restrictions from CHL to NCAA, that changes a lot of aspects of scouting and developing.
Yeah, and what, like, now that we've got that out of the way, like, are you kind of keeping an eye on certain types or players that you think Ottawa will take here?
In what sense, or just in general?
Like the overall theme of the draft. And in the next segment, we'll get into the themes that we've noticed over these drafts.
Well, I mean, it's going to be size. And unfortunately, Ben Kindle is a guy I like, but I don't think they're going to select him at 21st overall, even though they've got a lot of viewings of him dishing Carter Yakimchuk and getting assists from Carter Yakimchuk, playing with the Calgary Hitmen as teammates. So I'm slowly trying to let myself down easily, Ross, and know that they probably aren't going to select Ben Kindle, who's 5'10", 180, something like that.
Yeah.
So, not tiny, but certainly not a player the Sens typically look at. They have never selected a player 5'10" in the last 5 years, I should say, since 2020. So I guess I'm going to have to let go of that as an option. But I think, Ross, we're going to see a player drafted out of the CHL, most specifically WHL or OHL, be drafted by the Ottawa Senators with their first selection.
With their first selection, you're going to go that far.
Yeah. And I worded it that way, Ross, because I'm starting to believe that I don't think the Ottawa Senators will be picking at 21st overall. That's why I use that language.
But do you still think they'll pick in the first round or go even further back?
Yeah, I meant first selection as their first pick, not first round.
No, but that's what I mean. Like, do you think that if they do trade down, that they'll try to trade with a team that's from, let's say, the 25 to 32 range or further back?
Yes, I don't like the idea of trading a first round pick to get multiple second round picks. That doesn't interest me. I would still, and I'll be honest, it's mostly selfish reasons. I don't want to watch another first night of the draft and not have a Sens pick to be excited about or talk about. So it would pain me to see the Ottawa Senators trade out of the first round. But with the way the Ottawa Senators construct their lists compared to other teams' lists, maybe that's a smart thing to do, to trade for 2 second rounders. And then if they happen to select a player that may seem like a reach, it seems like less of a reach, or it can be looked at as better value if they're both taken in the second round. But I would like, Ross, for the Ottawa Senators to find a way to stay in the first round and then add maybe a middle second round pick. I know we've been seeing mock draft pick trades online from Sens fans. I think a lot of them are hopeful and maybe leaning too close to the Sens. I don't think we're going to see a scenario where the Ottawa Senators are able to get 2 first round picks for their one, even if they're late in the first round. And I don't see a scenario where,
well, that's impossible unless it's like, yeah, Nashville would never trade 23 and 26 for 21.
No, exactly.
No way.
So, well, and yeah, I'm not suggesting people, I guess I'm off on that. People didn't suggest that, so my bad. But
That'd be cool, though.
I think we're going to see a late first and a mid second. That would be the kind of value we're looking at. I think Philly at 31 would make a lot of sense for the Sens to try to trade back and then get one of their mid second rounders.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens on draft night. On the other side, one more note from our audit on the Senators drafting strategy, and then a note on Zdeno Chara, Hockey Hall of Famer. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day. All right, Pillsy. So as we try to parse through our own draft rankings and think who is an Ottawa Senator? When you think of an Ottawa Senator, right? Who is a person that fits the bill for that? If you had to describe your thoughts on like what is an Ottawa Senator, what would it be?
As far as draft picks?
Yeah.
6'2", at least. Let's start with that. High compete. Father that played in the NHL or pro hockey.
Yep.
And high floor. Those would be all the attributes of a typical Ottawa Senators draft pick.
I like that. So
I'm not even being funny with that. Like, I think that's accurate.
No, I think so too. The one thing I would add to that is I feel like raw athleticism is something that they really target. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, like which players are you giving or that lead you to believe that?
If you want to go with last year of an example, Blake Montgomery, Javon Moore, both of those would be my thoughts. Even Carter Yakimchuk, like he showed a lot of skill, but at the same time, it was like, oh man, like there's some rawness to where he's at.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I think about it. Well, if we're looking positionally at what the Ottawa Senators have targeted in the last number of years, well, why don't we just show you and we'll go from there. Out of the 36 selections made, the Ottawa Senators have taken 20 forwards, 13 defensemen, and 3 goalies. It felt like that was a part of their prerogative. Going back, obviously, 2019, they take Matt Sogard, then Marilainen in 2020, Kevin Riedler in 2022, and Vladimir Nikitin in 2023. So after not drafting a goalie last year, do you think that's somewhere they look in the later rounds?
Yeah, if they're going to take a goalie, I wouldn't want it to be anywhere early. Like I'm looking at maybe a 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick. I wouldn't want them going first round, obviously, 3rd round or 4th round. Especially Ross, goalies are such a crapshoot. Like you see some good value with goalies in the late round, so I'd rather they focus on forwards and defensemen with those earlier picks. But it's really difficult to try to look at the trends of what positions the Ottawa Senators are drafting year to year, because that's very reliant on what the draft class looks like, right? Like this year we know is a center heavy draft, especially in the first round. There's so many centers in the top 20. I believe unless they're targeting Blake Fiddler with the 21st overall pick, that it makes much more sense to try to target a forward.
And with that, let's look at how their themes have gone over the last number of years. Last year's size, and I like how you put that in all caps, as big of letters as you can. The year before, I mean, when you only have a 4th, a 5th, and 3 7th round picks, depth is almost as well as you can do. So I think that one's more on the asset management of only having those picks versus the players they selected. And we like Hoyt Stanley as a potential option down the road. Obviously, you knew he'd be a project being drafted out of the BCHL, but if you go to 2022, raw comes to mind. Like Philip Nordberg, extremely raw. Oscar Pettersson dominated against his own age group, but struggled to produce offense against higher competition, even though very little opportunity in terms of time on ice. And then you had Tomas Hamara, who
what's Hamara's size?
6 feet on the dot.
He's 6? Oh, okay. I thought he would have been in the 5s. All right.
No, on the dot. Stephen Halliday, as an overage pick, you knew that he was going to be a project, and it looks like that was a good swing for them in the 4th round. Jorian Donovan, same thing.
Yep.
Kevin Riedler, long path for goalies. We know that, but that's another guy that's kind of stood out to me as a guy to watch for in the next couple of years. 2021, like we just put COVID as the thought. Like they made 6 picks and only one of them is still with the organization, and only 2 of them got entry-level contracts. When you don't even sign a 2nd round pick to an entry-level contract, that's an eyebrow raiser for me with Ben Roger. They don't sign their 3rd round pick, Oliver Johansson, whose rights just expired. And then the later picks didn't work out. Carson Latimer is an awesome dude. We enjoyed having him on the show. And then Chandler Romeo, like they drafted him out of junior B. Like I get it. It was COVID, but come on. Let's wakey.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
And then, so I put in italics guys who have had at least one NHL game, who have gotten a taste of the NHL. And then in red are guys who their rights expired and never joined the organization officially. And the bolded players are full-time NHLers. So to get 4 full-time NHLers and likely 5 with Marilainen out of the 2020 draft, we just put grand slam for that one.
And Ross, to get the top 2 players of the draft. Like anybody that's doing a 2020 redraft will have Stützle and Sanderson as 1 and 2.
You got to. So that was unbelievable. And since then, it's been very believable or unbelievable if you see the difference between 2020.
Yeah, it depends who you ask. Yeah. Oh boy.
So to wrap up our audit, what are you hoping the theme is for this year's draft?
I was going to say change, Ross. I want, and look, I'm not saying they go draft Cameron Schmidt at 5'7" just to do something different, even though I like him as a player and he's got skill. But I just don't want to see a scenario where the first selection by the Ottawa Senators is clearly a bet on size. If he has size and other skills, like you look at a guy like Lyndon Lakovic, okay, you could get me into that. That guy can score. He's got some other skills. But I don't want to see a player brought in for his size and then them say, well, you can't teach size. He's got good reach. He's going to be a physical player. You can find those guys in other ways. You need to take a swing on some high potential skill that can really boost your prospect pipeline, maybe add some speed. I don't love Cullen Potter, but it would be refreshing to get a different style of player. Just give me something that isn't the typical Ottawa Senators pick where the online scouts are holding back their laughter.
I would go with skill as the one word theme to describe this. And you know what gives me confidence in that? The fact that now, after 2 years of watching really, under new ownership. And I think it's almost 2 years. It'd be November 1st of next season where it will be 2 full years for Steve Staios at the helm. He hasn't signed any of the Belleville guys yet.
Yeah.
So I think they're looking to gradually change the process one step at a time. First, let's focus on the NHL team. Then let's get a really good look at Belleville. And now let's get a really good look at the way we make picks at the NHL draft. Time will tell. We will see. But my thought process, and that's where my, not going to call it confidence. That's where my hope comes from, that we could see a bit of skill injected into the Ottawa Senators. Both Don Boyd and Steve Staios mentioning this morning that hockey sense will be atop the priority list for who they are ranking high, which let's see how Ben Kindle falls in there then, because that guy's hockey sense is elite. Cole Reshny, hockey sense, elite. Yep. Those are two undersized. Even Braden Coots, you could throw in there. Those are guys that aren't 6'4", but have elite hockey sense. So where are they ranked on the Senators board?
And Ross, if they went with one of those 3 players, I would applaud them. That would be such a smart move. It would bring something different because you have the size. If you want to bet on size, cool. You pushed all in on size on the roulette board. You've done that. So
in Vegas too.
Yeah, in Vegas. Yeah, like you've made it clear where you think the probability lies of producing NHL players. And that's cool. That's fine. You got to stick by your principles. But you also, Ross, when you have a portfolio in your financial portfolios with Monarch money, you want a little bit of diversity as well. And I think that's where the Ottawa Senators could really do something good here.
I can't wait for the NHL draft. We do have a live stream coming for you on Saturday. I am booking the heck out of it. We got great guests joining us. Really looking forward to it. It will start at 11:30 a.m. And Pilsy says I'm not allowed to tell you when it's going to end, but it will start at 11:30 a.m. The second round of the draft gets underway at noon. And yes, we will be doing an episode Friday after the first round to recap what we saw in what will be a very different, decentralized National Hockey League draft. You can draft players to be stars. You can also trade for them when they're prospects. And that's what the Ottawa Senators did back in 2001. One of the best trades in franchise history. A disgruntled Alexei Ashin goes to the New York Islanders. And they actually got the best of both worlds in that. They got a prospect who was just starting to make his mark in the National Hockey League. And they also got a second overall pick. And with that, they selected Jason Spezza. But the other half of the deal, the bigger half in height, Zdeno Chara, is now a Hockey Hall of Famer. My favorite player growing up. I think I've said before, I lived across the street from the Slovakian embassy. And now the two guys who I used to see come in and out of there every once in a while are both Hockey Hall of Famers. Marian Hossa got in a few years ago. And now Big Z, Zdeno Chara, got in. I know that was basically, you got one season as a Senators fan, Pillsy, being a Chara guy, and then he left. I was almost as heartbroken as I've ever been when he left on July 2nd, 2006. But what are your memories thinking back to Big Z on the Sens?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me, Ross, is, and I forget what year this is, but the LeCavier pitcher in the playoffs where he's got LeCavier down, arm pulled up, and like, if I wanted to, I could finish you right now, but I won't. The ragdolling of Brian McCabe, like just using his pure size to dominate players. And he wasn't just a big physical defenseman. He had some skill as well and great leadership qualities, if you ask the Boston Bruins. Just an elite player that played over 1,600 NHL games. This guy was playing into his 40s. Well-deserved Hockey Hall of Fame. Ross, this is one of my favorite Hockey Hall of Fame classes maybe ever. Like McGillney, Thornton, and then who am I blanking on the last guy? Duncan Keith. Like, this is a great Hockey Hall of Fame class this year.
For years, I used to say the only two players with multiple Norris trophies that aren't in the Hall of Fame are Duncan Keith and Erik Karlsson. But as one goes in the Hall of Fame, another gets added to the other side of it. Cale Makar just won his second Norris trophy this year.
I
So
think
now
he
it's
may end up being a Hall of Famer. Yeah.
Erik Karlsson and Cale Makar. Could you imagine a world where Zdeno Chara got to be a D partner of Erik Karlsson? I know a lot of things would have had to be different, but if you're making an all-time Senators team, that's the top pair. It's Chara and Karlsson. And I think the one thing, and Chara played 99 games with the Ottawa Senators in the regular season, actually 4 less than he played with the New York Islanders, but he had to go back to where it all started to jump back ahead of where he was with Ottawa. He played 72 games as a 44-year-old a couple of years ago. He still got 14 points plus 8, but obviously was nowhere near the player that he once was. You look at all time in Sens history, 299 games. He's third in plus minus in Sens history behind Wade Redden, his oftentimes D partner, and Daniel Alfredson. In 299 games with Ottawa Pilsy, Zdeno Chara was 109 plus.
Amazing. Yeah.
It sucks they couldn't find a way to keep him. And I know a lot of people say it came down to they offered Redden and Chara both $6.5 million. Chara wanted $7 million a year. And then because Redden said yes and Chara said no, they gave Redden $7 million anyways.
Well, and Ross, I think Chara made it clear he wanted to go somewhere where he could be the leader there, right? And that was a big reason why Boston was appealing to him. And did they give him the C right away, or?
I believe so.
Yeah,
he changed the complete culture. I know people talk about Patrice Bergeron, but that move, and I'm still mad at Peter Chiarelli because he was Ottawa's assistant GM. He went to Boston, and his first move was taking Chara with him.
Yeah.
Damn it. Just a little throwback here for those who didn't see on Twitter. This was at the Sens at Your Service dinner back in 2002. January 28th, 2002. And that was actually a picture. And that was my good buddy Libor, the Slovakian ambassador's son. And that was the cover of the Ottawa Citizen the next day. Do you know what the headline was?
I do, but I'm going to let you say it.
I really liked it. A black eye affair. Obviously a black tie event type thing, even though I'm wearing a white turtleneck with a Sens jersey. Pilsy, explain why it's a black eye affair. I have that jersey in my closet right now.
All right. As Ross goes to get that prop for show and tell, for the listeners, Chara is towering over Ross and his buddy as kids in his white shirt and black bow tie as a server. And he's got a black eye sporting it. So black eye, black tie. Good wordplay.
Look at this, Pilsy. Look at that.
That's awesome.
All these, and front and center, right by the stain. Every one of my jerseys has a stain on it. Game worn, as I like to say. Roger Nielsen, who was the first Ottawa Senators member of their organization to be put in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So now it's a lot bigger than just Roger Nielsen, who coached 2 games for the Ottawa Senators, by the way. But it was such a great moment because he came to Ottawa as an assistant coach, after associate coach, I'd imagine, under Jacques Martin. And then knowing that he wasn't likely going to get another chance to be a head coach in the National Hockey League, Jacques Martin stepped aside for 2 games to allow Roger Nielsen to hit the 1,000 games coached plateau. And that was the only connection the Senators' modern-day team had to the Hockey Hall of Fame until 2014 when your guy, Dominic Hasek, got in, but only 43 games with the Ottawa Senators, right? It wasn't until 2020 where a Senators draft pick got into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and that was Marian Hossa.
Yep.
And now, in the classes since, so from 2020 until now, and there was no 2021 class because of COVID, now you have 4 players, 1 in each except for last year, in each of the classes. Daniel Alfredson was in 2022. Tom Barrasso in his 7 games in Ottawa in 2023. And then Zdeno Chara now in 2025. So nice to see the modern day Senators have a little bit more representation, even though if it was baseball style, obviously Zdeno Chara would be going in wearing a Boston Bruins logo and Marian Hossa would be going in wearing a Chicago Blackhawks logo. No, not you, Atlanta Thrashers. And of course, Daniel Alfredson would be wearing a Senators logo, but it is nice to see some well-deserved respect. First ballot Hall of Famer, Zdeno Chara.
So, Ross, I'll ask you this. Who will be the next Senators affiliate person to possibly enter the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Well, we've been banging the table about Brian Murray for a number of years on this show. I hope it happens, but I'll go with Erik Karlsson.
Yeah, okay.
And some people might push back that he's not a Hockey Hall of Famer, and to that I say, haha.
Yeah, he's a Hockey Hall of Famer. He was the third best player in the league for years behind Crosby and McDavid. Yeah.
He was unbelievable.
One guy I just looked up, but I think he should be in the Hall of Pretty Good, not the Hall of Fame. Marian Gaborik, I think, is an interesting debate, but I don't know if he has what it takes to be in the Hall of Fame.
But you know what would be crazy about that? Just since we're on the topic of Slovak hockey players, the city of Trenčín in Slovakia, the population is 54,000 people. Hossa, Chara, and Gaborik are all from that town.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Could you imagine if they're all Hockey Hall of Famers and all play at the same time, same era? That would be incredible.
Yeah,
so there you have it.
I don't think Gaborik gets it. But
no, next year, Keith Tkachuk. Come on.
Yeah, Keith Tkachuk's got to be in there. It's crazy that he's not yet. That's why I'm glad Alex Mogilny got in. That
so
was
never lose hope.
Coming. Yeah,
never lose hope. Never lose hope. Just like we did with Alfie, didn't get in a couple times. Never lose hope.
Yep, we knew Alfie was going to get in, though. It was just a matter of when.
I still love the episode we did right after Alfie got in. You can go check that out wherever you get podcasts. For today, we say goodbye. We'll chat tomorrow with our final draft rankings, and we will also look at what we learned today going through the draft history for Ottawa and point out who we think could be realistic options at 21st overall, and maybe a couple just below if the Senators do end up trading down. But thank you for watching, listening, and engaging with the show. It means a whole lot to us here. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Hit the thumbs up on YouTube. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.